The crack of gunfire echoed through the dusty streets of Pioche, Nevada, as Katherine Collins ducked behind an overturned wagon, her heart hammering against her ribs. 2 months ago, she'd come west seeking a fresh start, not to become a pawn in a deadly territorial feud between the notorious Blackburn Boys and the ruthless Delgado gang. Now, as bullets splintered the wood inches from her head, she realized her decision to become the town's new schoolteacher might be the last one she'd ever make. It was the spring of 1876, and Pioche had transformed from a booming mining town to a powder keg ready to explode. Katherine had arrived filled with hope and ambition, her teaching credentials and city manners marking her as different from the moment she stepped off the stagecoach. At 24, she'd left behind a comfortable life in Boston following the death of her parents, determined to forge her own path in the untamed West. The saloon doors across the street burst open. Katherine shrank further behind her meager cover, her blue calico dress smudged with dirt and sweat. She peered through a crack in the wagon's boards and spotted 4 men with bandanas pulled up over their faces, Delgado's men, judging by their distinctive red neckwear. They were positioning themselves behind water troughs and hitching posts, rifles aimed at the general store where several of the Blackburn gang had holed up. "Miss Collins." The whispered call came from her left. Katherine turned to see a man crouched in the narrow alley between the apothecary and the telegraph office. His face was partially shadowed by a worn Stetson, but she recognized him immediately. Kit Jackson, a rancher whose small spread lay 10 miles outside of town. They had exchanged only brief pleasantries in the past, once when she'd purchased supplies at Henderson's general store, and again when she'd attended Sunday services at the small white church on the hill. "Mr. Jackson," she whispered back, her voice quavering. "Stay low and move toward me," he instructed, his voice calm despite the chaos. "There's about to be hell unleashed, and you don't want to be caught in the middle." Katherine glanced back at the street. More men had appeared on the rooftop of the Silver Dollar Saloon, Blackburn's territory. The tension in the air was palpable, like the static before a lightning strike. Taking a deep breath, she gathered her skirts and crawled toward the alley, staying as low as possible. A bullet ricocheted off a nearby water trough, sending splinters flying. She stifled a scream and quickened her pace. When she reached the alley, Kit pulled her deeper into the shadows. He smelled of leather, horses, and clean soap, an oddly comforting combination amidst the chaos. "Follow me," he said. "I know a way out through the back of these buildings. My horse is tethered behind the livery." "But what about everyone else?" Katherine asked, looking back toward the main street where townspeople were scrambling for cover. "Shouldn't we warn them?" Kit's green eyes met hers. "Sheriff Mills already sent women and children to the church. Those still out here are either fools or have chosen sides." His expression softened slightly. "You're new here, Miss Collins. You don't understand how long this has been brewing." Another volley of gunfire erupted, louder this time. Katherine flinched, and Kit instinctively pulled her closer. "We need to move now," he insisted. They crept through the narrow passage between buildings, Kit leading the way with a Colt revolver drawn. Katherine tried to keep her breathing even, but fear threatened to overwhelm her. The schoolhouse where she taught was on the far end of town, and her small rented room above the millinery shop was in the opposite direction from where they were headed. "Everything I own is in my room," she whispered. "Better to lose possessions than your life," Kit replied without looking back. "Besides, this won't be the last you see of Pioche. We just need to wait for this storm to pass." They emerged behind the apothecary, where the sounds of gunfire were slightly muffled. Kit paused at each corner, checking for danger before proceeding. His movements were fluid and practiced, betraying a familiarity with dangerous situations that made Katherine wonder about his past. "How did you know to find me?" she asked as they crouched behind a stack of empty crates. Kit glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "I came to town for supplies. Saw you duck behind that wagon when the Blackburn boys started taking positions. Been trying to figure out how to reach you for the past 20 minutes. Why would you risk yourself for me? We've barely spoken." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Ma raised me to believe a gentleman doesn't leave a lady in distress. Besides, Pioche needs its schoolteacher." Before Katherine could respond, a man rounded the corner ahead of them. He wore a black hat and had a pistol gripped in his right hand. The red bandana around his neck marked him as one of Delgado's men. Kit reacted instantly, shoving Katherine behind him and raising his Colt. "Don't," he warned the man. "We're not involved in this fight." The gang member hesitated, his dark eyes flicking between Kit and Katherine. "The boss says no witnesses. Everyone in town picks a side today." "We've picked our side," Kit replied evenly. "And it's not in Pioche." For a tense moment, Katherine thought the man would shoot. Instead, the crash of breaking glass from the main street drew his attention. His head turned slightly, and Kit seized the opportunity, lunging forward and striking the man with the butt of his pistol. The gang member crumpled to the ground, unconscious. "Come on," Kit urged, grasping Katherine's hand and pulling her toward the livery stable. "That noise won't distract them for long." Katherine ran alongside him, her heart pounding as they reached the back of the stable. A magnificent chestnut gelding stood tethered to a post, saddled and ready. The horse nickered softly as Kit approached. "This is Rusty," Kit said, quickly checking the cinch. "He's strong enough to carry us both until we can get to safety." "Where are we going?" Katherine asked, accepting his help as he lifted her onto the saddle. Kit swung up behind her, his chest warm against her back as he reached around to take the reins. "My ranch. It's isolated enough that neither gang will bother us there." The sound of gunfire intensified behind them, and shouts filled the air. Katherine looked back to see smoke rising from one of the buildings on the main street. "Hold tight," Kit instructed, and then they were galloping down the back alley and out of town, leaving the violence of Pioche behind them. The landscape opened before them, vast expanses of sagebrush and rocky terrain under an impossibly blue Nevada sky. Despite the circumstances, Katherine felt a surge of something like exhilaration as the horse carried them away from danger, the wind whipping at her hair that had come loose from its pins. Kit kept Rusty at a steady gallop for nearly 10 minutes before slowing to a more sustainable pace. "We need to conserve his strength," he explained. "It's still a fair ride to my place." Katherine nodded, suddenly very aware of the intimacy of their position, his arms around her, the steady rise and fall of his chest against her back. She'd never been this close to a man before, not even during the brief courtship she'd had back in Boston. "Thank you," she said, breaking the silence. "You saved my life back there." "Don't thank me yet," Kit replied, his breath warm against her ear. "We still have a ways to go, and Delgado's men sometimes patrol these outer lands." The mention of danger sobered her. "What started this feud? The children in my class whisper about it, but no one will speak of it directly." Kit was quiet for a moment, guiding Rusty around a patch of particularly rocky ground. "It started 3 years ago over mining claims. Blackburn accused Delgado of jumping his claim at a promising silver deposit. Words turned to bullets, and Blackburn's youngest brother ended up dead. Since then, it's been an eye for an eye, with innocent townspeople caught in between. And the sheriff doesn't stop it." Kit gave a humorless laugh. "Sheriff Mills does what he can, but he's one man against two gangs with more than 20 men between them. The territorial governor sent for federal marshals 2 weeks ago, but who knows when they'll arrive. They rode in silence for a while, the landscape gradually changing as they headed north. The flat desert gave way to rolling hills dotted with juniper trees. In the distance, Katherine could make out mountains, their peaks still capped with snow despite the spring warmth. "There it is," Kit said eventually, pointing to a small valley ahead. Katherine saw a modest ranch nestled against the hillside, a main house built of sturdy logs, a barn, corral, and a few outbuildings. It wasn't grand by any means, but there was something inviting about the thin wisp of smoke curling from the stone chimney and the neat arrangement of the buildings. "It's lovely," she said sincerely. She felt rather than saw his smile. "It's not much, but it's mine. Paid for it free and clear last year after driving cattle up to Virginia City." As they approached, a dog came bounding out to meet them, a black and white border collie that barked excitedly at their arrival. "That's Patch," Kit said, dismounting and then reaching up to help Katherine down. His hands were strong and steady on her waist, and for a moment after her feet touched the ground, they stood closer than propriety would normally allow. "He's friendly, just noisy." Katherine smoothed her rumpled dress, suddenly self-conscious about her appearance. Dust coated her clothing. Her hair had fallen almost completely from its pins, and she could only imagine how flushed her face must be from the ride. A woman emerged from the house, older, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a practical bun. She wore a simple dress and apron, and her weathered face creased with concern as she approached. "Kit, we heard gunfire from town. What's happened?" Her eyes fell on Katherine. "And who's this?" "Rosa, this is Miss Katherine Collins, the new schoolteacher from Pioche," Kit said, leading Rusty toward the water trough. "Miss Collins, this is Rosa Alvarez. She and her husband Miguel help me run the ranch." Rosa's expression softened. "Señorita Collins, welcome. You look exhausted, poor thing." "The Blackburn and Delgado gangs have finally decided to settle their differences," Kit explained grimly. "Turned the whole town into a battlefield. Miss Collins was caught in the middle." Rosa made a sympathetic clicking sound. "Come inside, Nina. We'll get you cleaned up and fed. Miguel is checking the fences, but he'll be back by sundown." Katherine followed Rosa toward the house, casting a glance back at Kit, who was tending to his horse. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up and nodded reassuringly. Something in that simple gesture made her feel safer than she had since arriving in Nevada. The interior of the ranch house was modest but comfortable, with simple furnishings and clean, swept floors. A stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, with a rocking chair positioned nearby. Hand-woven rugs added color to the wooden floors, and a few books were stacked neatly on a small table. "The bedroom at the end of the hall is yours," Rosa said, leading Katherine through the house. "Kit's is on the opposite end, and Miguel and I have the small cabin out back. I'll heat water for you to wash." "I don't want to impose," Katherine began, but Rosa waved away her protest. "Nonsense. Any friend of Kit's is welcome here." She paused, giving Katherine an appraising look. "He doesn't bring people here often. He must think highly of you." Before Katherine could respond to that curious statement, Rosa bustled out to heat water. Left alone, Katherine took the opportunity to examine the room more closely. Unlike the rest of the house, which was functional but Spartan, this room had small touches that spoke of care: curtains at the window, a vase of wildflowers on the dresser, a quilt on the bed that appeared to be handmade. Rosa returned with a basin of warm water and clean towels. "There's a dress in the wardrobe that might fit you. It belonged to Kit's sister when she visited last summer." "He has a sister," Katherine asked, surprised. Rosa nodded. Eliza. Lives in Sacramento with her husband and children, visits once a year. She hesitated, then added, Kit keeps to himself mostly, has his reasons. After Rosa left, Katherine washed the dust from her face and arms, the warm water reviving her. The dress she found in the wardrobe was simpler than her own, a practical brown cotton, but it was clean and fit well enough once she adjusted the waist ties. She tried to pin her hair back into some semblance of order, but without her proper hairpins, she could only manage to braid it loosely. Looking in the small mirror above the dresser, she hardly recognized herself. The prim schoolteacher from Boston had been replaced by a woman with wind-flushed cheeks and a wild gleam in her blue eyes. By the time she emerged from the bedroom, delicious smells were coming from the kitchen. Kit had come inside and was washing up at a basin near the back door, his sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned, muscular forearms. He looked up as she entered, and something flickered in his eyes. "The dress suits you," he said simply. Katherine felt herself blush. "Thank you for the loan." "And for everything else." He dried his hands on a towel. "I've sent Miguel into town on the back trails to assess the situation. He knows how to stay out of sight. Is it safe for him? Miguel was a scout in the war. If anyone can get in and out of a bad situation undetected, it's him." Kit pulled out a chair at the table for her. "Sit. Rosa's stew will put some strength back in you." They ate together, the food simple but hearty beef stew with vegetables from the root cellar, fresh bread, and sweet preserves. Kit asked about her teaching, and Katherine found herself telling him about her 23 students, ranging from 6 to 16 years old. "They're bright children," she said, "eager to learn despite having few resources. We need more books, but I've been making do." "Town council's always been tight with funds for the school," Kit remarked. "Too busy arguing about which saloon gets to stay open latest." Katherine smiled slightly. "I've noticed, but the children deserve better." Kit studied her for a moment. "You care about them. That's rare out here. Most teachers don't last more than a season before heading back east. Is that what you expect of me? That I'll run back to Boston at the first sign of trouble?" "I wouldn't blame you if you did," Kit said honestly. "Life here is hard, especially for a woman alone." Katherine set down her spoon. "I have nothing to return to. My parents are gone, the family home sold to pay debts. I came west because I wanted to build something meaningful, not because I was chasing romantic notions about frontier life." Kit's expression softened. "Then you're braver than most, Miss Collins." "Katherine," she corrected him. "After today, I think we can dispense with formalities." A small smile played at his lips. "Katherine," he repeated, and something about the way he said her name made her stomach flutter. The conversation flowed easier after that. Kit told her about his journey west after the war, how he'd worked as a cowhand before saving enough to buy this small ranch. He spoke of his dreams to expand, to raise cattle that would rival the great herds of Texas. As the afternoon waned into evening, Katherine realized she hadn't thought about the danger in Pioche for hours. Here, in this snug ranch house with the scent of wood smoke and stew in the air, the violence of the morning seemed distant and unreal. Their peaceful interlude was interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Kit was instantly alert, moving to the window with his hand on his holstered pistol. "It's Miguel," he said after a moment, the tension leaving his shoulders. The man who entered was older than Kit by perhaps 15 years, with a weathered face and salt and pepper beard. His dark eyes were sharp and assessing as they landed on Katherine. "Senor Kit, the situation in town is bad," he reported without preamble. "The bank is burning and the sheriff has been shot." "Dead?" Kit asked grimly. "No, wounded in the shoulder. Dr. Winters is treating him." Miguel removed his hat. The Delgado gang has taken over the south end of town, the Blackburns the north. They've drawn battle lines, and anyone caught crossing is considered an enemy, Katherine gasped. My students, most families have fled to outlying farms or the church on the hill, Miguel reassured her. Padre Gonzalez is keeping them safe in the basement. Relief flooded through her, but it was short-lived. There's more, Miguel continued, his expression grave. They're looking for the schoolteacher, both sides. Kit's brow furrowed. Why would they want Katherine? Miguel shrugged. I couldn't get close enough to hear details, but they're offering rewards for information on her whereabouts. Kit's hand moved unconsciously to his gun again. No one knows she's here. I was careful, patron. No one followed me. Katherine felt cold despite the warmth of the room. Why would they be looking for me? I've had no dealings with either gang. Kit and Miguel exchanged glances. It might be because you were seen leaving with me, Kit suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. Rosa, who had been listening silently, spoke up. Or perhaps they think you witnessed something you shouldn't have. Katherine tried to remember the chaotic moments in town. Had she seen something significant without realizing it? A face, a transaction, a hidden message. I can't think of anything, she said, frustrated. It doesn't matter now, Kit said decisively. What matters is keeping you safe until we can figure this out. He turned to Miguel. Double the watch tonight, no lanterns after dark. As Miguel left to secure the property, Rosa began clearing the table. You should rest, she told Katherine kindly. Tomorrow will bring clearer thoughts. Despite the older woman's advice, sleep proved elusive. Katherine lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the occasional bark from Pioche, the creak of the house settling. Her mind kept returning to Pioche, to her students, to the danger that had somehow followed her here. Eventually, she rose and wrapped a borrowed shawl around her shoulders. Perhaps some fresh air would clear her head. She moved quietly through the darkened house, careful not to wake the others. The porch offered a view of the valley below, silver washed in moonlight. Stars crowded the vast Nevada sky, more than she'd ever seen in Boston. Katherine drew in a deep breath of the cool night air. Couldn't sleep, she startled at Kit's voice. He was sitting in a shadow at the far end of the porch, a rifle across his knees. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to disturb you. You didn't. He shifted slightly, and moonlight revealed his face. I'm keeping watch. Katherine moved closer, drawn to his calm presence. Do you think they'll come here? Not tonight, but it pays to be cautious. He paused, then added, You're safe here, Katherine. She believed him, she realized. Despite knowing him for less than a day, she trusted this quiet, steady man with her life. May I join you for a while? She asked. Kit gestured to the bench beside him. As she sat, he draped a blanket over her shoulders. The desert gets cold at night. They sat in companionable silence for a time, the vast landscape spread before them. Katherine found her anxiety gradually subsiding, replaced by a strange sense of peace. Tell me about Boston, Kit said eventually. I've never been further east than St. Louis, Katherine smiled in the darkness. It's nothing like this. Buildings crowded together, streets filled with carriages and people, the harbor busy with ships from all over the world. She paused, remembering. But there are beautiful things too, the public garden in spring, the brick townhouses with their neat black shutters, bookshops with volumes stacked to the ceiling. You miss it, he observed. Parts of it, she acknowledged. But there's a freedom here I never had there. In Boston, my life was prescribed: teach at a ladies' seminary, marry a suitable man, maintain a respectable household. Here. She gestured to the wild landscape. Here I feel as though I could become someone else entirely. Kit was quiet for a moment. And who would that be, if you could choose? The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her that before. "Someone brave," she said finally. "Someone who makes a difference in people's lives, not just a proper Boston lady concerned with appearances and social standing." "I think you're already braver than you know," Kit said softly. Their eyes met in the moonlight, and Katherine felt something shift between them, a recognition, a possibility. Then Patch gave a low, warning growl, and Kit was instantly alert, the moment broken. "Inside," he said tersely, rising to his feet. "Now." Katherine didn't question him, hurrying back into the house as Kit moved to the edge of the porch, rifle raised. Through the window, she saw him signal to Miguel, who emerged from the shadows near the barn, his own weapon ready. For several tense minutes, nothing happened. Then Katherine heard the distant sound of horses approaching, still far off but drawing nearer. Rosa appeared beside her, a shawl wrapped around her nightdress. "Come away from the window," she whispered, drawing Katherine toward the back of the house. "Kit knows what to do." They retreated to the kitchen, where Rosa lit a small lamp, keeping the flame low. "There is a cellar," she explained, moving aside a rug to reveal a trapdoor. "If trouble comes, we go down there." Katherine nodded, though the thought of hiding underground made her stomach clench with fear. "Will Kit and Miguel be all right?" Rosa's expression was grim but determined. "They are both survivors, Nina. But they cannot protect us if they are worried about where we are. We must be ready to hide if they give the signal." The sound of hoofbeats grew louder, then stopped. Male voices carried on the night air, though Katherine couldn't make out the words. She strained to listen, her heart pounding. After what seemed an eternity, the back door opened and Kit entered the kitchen. His face was taut with tension, but he wasn't holding his rifle. "3 riders from town," he reported. "Not gang members, it's Dr. Winters, Deputy Hayes, and Martin from the telegraph office. What do they want?" Rosa asked, her hand still on the cellar door. "Information about the schoolteacher. They're concerned for her safety." Kit's eyes found Katherine's. "The doctor wants to speak with you." Katherine straightened her spine. "Then I shall speak with him." Kit looked like he might object, but instead he nodded. "I'll be right beside you. Miguel is keeping an eye on them, just in case this is a trick." She followed him to the front porch where 3 men sat on horseback, their faces grave in the moonlight. She recognized all of them Dr. Winters had treated one of her students for a broken arm just last month. Deputy Hayes had spoken at the school about safety, and Mr. Martin handled the letters she sent back east. "Miss Collins," Dr. Winters said, relief evident in his voice. "Thank God you're safe." "What's happening in Pioche?" she asked. "Why is everyone looking for me?" The men exchanged glances, and Deputy Hayes spoke up. "Madam, before the shooting started, you were seen talking to a man outside the telegraph office. Do you recall that conversation?" Katherine frowned, trying to remember. The events of the morning seemed so long ago now. "Yes, it was Mr. Evans. He told me a telegram had arrived for me from Sacramento." "That telegram is why both gangs want to find you," Martin said, his voice tight with anxiety. "Evans was shot dead an hour after speaking to you. We found a copy of the message in his pocket. It was a warning about a federal marshal traveling undercover to arrest both Blackburn and Delgado." Realization dawned on Katherine. "They think I know the marshal's identity." "Doctor." Winters nodded grimly. "Both gangs believe you were tipped off, and that's why you left town when you did. They think you're either working with the law or that you know something that could expose them." "But I don't," Katherine protested. "I never received any telegram. I was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time." "Delgado and Blackburn won't believe that," the deputy said. "They've put a price on your head, dead or alive." Kit's hand moved to the small of Katherine's back, a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the visitors. "She's safe here," he stated flatly. Dr. Winters sighed. For now, perhaps, but they're searching every ranch and homestead within 20 miles of Pioche. It's only a matter of time before they find her." "What about the actual marshal?" Kit asked. "Is he in town?" "If he is, he hasn't shown himself," Deputy Hayes replied. "Sheriff's still laid up with his wound, and I can't hold the town alone." A tense silence fell over the group. Catherine's mind raced. If she stayed, she would be putting Kit, Rosa, and Miguel in danger. If she left, she'd be at the mercy of two violent gangs who believed she possessed information she didn't have. "There's a stage leaving for Carson City tomorrow at dawn," Martin offered. "It's taking the families who want to escape the violence. Miss Collins could be on it." Kit shook his head. "They'll be watching the stage line." "What about heading north?" Dr. Winters suggested. "The mining camp at Eureka is 4 days' ride, but the territorial marshal has deputies stationed there." Katherine felt overwhelmed, fear threatening to cloud her thinking. Kit must have sensed it, because his hand on her back pressed gently, reassuringly. "We need time to consider options," he told the men. "For tonight, Miss Collins stays here protected." The visitors didn't look satisfied, but they nodded reluctantly. "We'll return to town and try to maintain some order," Deputy Hayes said. "But be on alert. Both gangs have men combing the countryside." After they rode away, Katherine released a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I've brought danger to your home," she said quietly. "I'm so sorry." Kit turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "This isn't your fault, and I'm not sorry I brought you here." Their eyes held for a long moment. Katherine felt a strange certainty settle over her. Whatever happened next, she was exactly where she was meant to be. The remainder of the night passed without incident, though sleep continued to elude Katherine. By dawn, she had made a decision. She found Kit in the barn saddling Rusty. "I need to go to Carson City," she announced. Kit looked up, surprise evident on his face. "Carson City? Why?" "The territorial governor is there. If I can speak with him directly, explain the situation, he might be able to send more deputies to Pioche and end this feud." "It's 3 days' hard ride," Kit pointed out, "through country controlled by both gangs." Katherine lifted her chin. "I won't ask you to take me. I can. That's not what I meant," Kit interrupted, his voice firm. "Of course I'm taking you. I'm just saying we need to be prepared." "We?" The corner of his mouth lifted in a half-smile. "You didn't think I'd let you make that journey alone, did you?" Relief and something warmer flooded through her. "Thank you," she said simply. They spent the morning making preparations. Rosa packed food for the journey while Miguel drew a detailed map, marking safe water sources and places to avoid. Kit selected his most reliable horses, Rusty for himself and a steady gray mare named Pearl for Katherine. "We'll travel at night when possible," he explained as they reviewed the route. "Stay away from the main trails. It will take longer, but it's safer." By midday, they were ready to depart. Katherine had changed back into her own dress, now cleaned and mended by Rosa's skilled hands. The older woman hugged her tightly before she mounted. "Be careful, Nina," she whispered. "And watch over him too. He acts strong, but he carries many burdens." Before Katherine could ask what she meant, Kit was helping her into the saddle. Pearl was indeed a steady mount, responding easily to Katherine's light touch on the reins. They set out heading northwest, taking a deer trail that wound through juniper-covered hills. Kit rode slightly ahead, constantly scanning their surroundings. They spoke little at first, both alert for any sign of pursuit. By late afternoon, they had covered considerable ground. Kit led them to a small spring nestled in a rocky outcropping, a place to rest and water the horses before continuing. "You ride well," he observed as Katherine dismounted smoothly. "I wouldn't have expected that from a city lady." She smiled, stretching her back. "My father believed in practical education. He insisted I learn to ride, swim, and even shoot a small pistol, all quite scandalous for Boston society. He sounds like a wise man. He was. A shadow of sadness crossed her face. He would have liked it out here, I think. The openness, the honesty of the landscape. Kit nodded in understanding. My father felt the same. He brought us west after the war, said a man could breathe out here. He paused, filling their canteens from the spring. He died my first year ranching. Pneumonia took him before the doctor could reach us. I'm sorry, Katherine said softly. Kit handed her a canteen, their fingers brushing briefly. Life out here teaches you to value what time you have with people. Nothing's guaranteed. The simple truth of his words resonated with her. In Boston, life had been structured, predictable. Here in the West, each day was a gift, each connection more precious for its fragility. They continued their journey as the sun began its descent, riding through increasingly rugged terrain. Kit seemed to know the land intimately, finding paths Katherine would never have noticed. As dusk fell, he led them to a sheltered canyon where they could make camp for a few hours. We'll rest until the moon rises, then continue, he said, helping her down from Pearl. Less chance of being spotted at night. Katherine was grateful for the rest. Though she was accustomed to riding, she wasn't used to such long hours in the saddle. While Kit tended to the horses, she gathered wood for a small, carefully hidden fire. They ate a simple meal of jerky, hardtack, and dried fruit. The fire cast a warm glow on their faces, creating a small circle of light in the vast darkness. Tell me about your ranch, Katherine said, breaking the comfortable silence. How did you come to settle there? Kit poked at the fire with a stick. After the war, I drifted for a while, worked cattle drives, did some scouting for the army. His voice held no pride, just simple statement of fact. Saved every dollar I could. When I rode through that valley, something about it felt right. Like it had been waiting for me. It's beautiful land, Katherine agreed. It's hard land, Kit corrected gently. Beautiful, yes, but it demands everything from you. Every day is a negotiation with nature, water, weather, predators. He looked up, meeting her eyes across the fire. But there's a clarity to that kind of life. No pretense, no games. Just honest work and whatever you can build with your own hands. Katherine considered his words. That's what drew me west, I think. In Boston, everything was layers of propriety and social rules. I taught young ladies to recite poetry and play pianoforte, but never to think for themselves. She smiled ruefully. My students in Pioche may not know proper etiquette, but they ask questions that would scandalize a Boston classroom. And you prefer that? I prefer authenticity, she said simply. Even when it's difficult. Kit studied her for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. You're not what I expected, Katherine Collins. What did you expect? Someone who'd run screaming back east at the first sign of trouble, he admitted with a slight smile. Instead, you're planning to face down the territorial governor. Katherine laughed softly. I surprise myself sometimes. They fell into comfortable conversation as they ate, sharing stories of their lives before their paths crossed. Kit told her about his sister Eliza and her 3 children, how they wrote faithfully every month. Katherine spoke of her childhood in Massachusetts, her father's business importing textiles, her mother's devotion to charitable causes. As the fire burned down to embers, a comfortable silence fell between them. The vast canopy of stars overhead seemed close enough to touch. We should get a few hours' sleep, Kit finally said, reluctance evident in his voice. I'll take first watch. Katherine nodded, though she wasn't sure she could sleep. Her body was tired, but her mind was alert, aware of Kit's presence just feet away. She settled onto her bedroll, watching as he moved to sit on a rock overlooking their small camp, his rifle across his knees. "Kit," she called softly. He turned, his face half-shadowed. "Yes, thank you for everything." He didn't respond immediately, but his expression softened. "Get some rest, Katherine. Tomorrow will be a long day." Despite her certainty that sleep would elude her, Katherine drifted off almost immediately, lulled by the distant call of a night bird and the knowledge that Kit was watching over her. She woke to his hand on her shoulder, gentle but insistent. "Moon's up," he whispered. "Time to move." They packed quickly and silently, erasing all traces of their camp. The moon provided enough light to travel by, casting the landscape in silver and shadow. Kit led them higher into the hills, following game trails that wound through stands of pine and aspen. Their second day of travel proved more challenging. The terrain grew increasingly steep, and twice they had to backtrack when the trail became impassable. By midday, dark clouds were gathering over the mountains ahead. "Storm coming," Kit observed grimly. "We need to find shelter before it hits." They pushed on, the air growing heavy with impending rain. The horses sensed it too, becoming restless and eager to move faster. Katherine's muscles ached from the constant vigilance required to navigate the difficult trails, but she didn't complain. Late in the afternoon, they crested a ridge and saw a small cabin nestled among the pines below. "Line shack," Kit explained. "Used by ranchers during roundup when they're working cattle in these high pastures. Should be empty this time of year." They approached cautiously, Kit circling the structure once before determining it was unoccupied. The cabin was simple, one room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and a narrow bed. It was dusty but dry, and would provide welcome shelter from the approaching storm. While Katherine settled the horses in the lean-to attached to the cabin, Kit gathered firewood and checked their supplies. By the time the first heavy drops of rain began to fall, they were secure inside with a fire crackling in the hearth. The storm hit with surprising ferocity, rain lashing against the small windows and wind howling through the pines. Thunder rumbled across the mountains, and lightning illuminated the cabin in brief, brilliant flashes. "At least the rain will wash away our tracks," Kit remarked, heating coffee over the fire. Katherine stood by the window, watching the storm's fury. "It's magnificent," she said. "Terrifying, but magnificent." Kit joined her, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Nature's reminder that we're just visitors here," he said quietly. She turned to look at him, struck by how the firelight carved shadows across his features, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the thoughtful depth of his eyes. Something shifted in her chest, a recognition, a possibility she hadn't allowed herself to consider until now. Kit felt her gaze and met it, his expression changing subtly. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken thoughts. A particularly loud crack of thunder broke the moment. Kit stepped back, returning to the fire to check on their coffee. "The storm might last through the night," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "We should rest while we can." Katherine nodded, grateful for the practical suggestion. She helped prepare a simple meal from their provisions, and they ate in companionable silence, listening to the rain drum against the roof. The question of sleeping arrangements loomed as the evening progressed. There was only one bed, narrow but adequate for one person. "You take the bed," Kit said, settling the matter before she could worry over it. "I'll be fine by the fire." Katherine didn't argue, though she felt guilty about his discomfort. She removed her boots and outer garments, keeping her chemise and petticoat for modesty, and slipped under the rough wool blanket. The bed was hard but infinitely better than the ground. From her position, she could see Kit arranging his bedroll near the hearth, adding another log to ensure the fire would last through the night. He moved with a quiet efficiency that spoke of years spent in the wilderness, self-sufficient and capable. "Kit," she said softly, "how did you learn to live like this? To be so at home in the wild?" He glanced over, surprised by the question. After a moment's consideration, he replied, "My grandfather was a frontiersman in Kentucky. Spent his winters teaching me tracking, hunting, how to read the land." A faint smile touched his lips. "Most boys were learning Greek and Latin. I was learning which plants were edible and how to predict weather from the behavior of animals. You were fortunate to have such a teacher." "I didn't think so at the time," Kit admitted, settling onto his bedroll. "I wanted to be like other boys, playing games in town instead of tramping through forests. It wasn't until the war that I realized how valuable those skills were." Katherine hesitated, then asked, "You fought in the war?" "Union cavalry," he said simply. "Spent most of my time scouting behind enemy lines. Not something I care to remember most days." The pain in his voice was subtle but unmistakable. Katherine understood his reluctance to speak of it and didn't press further. "Good night, Kit," she said instead. "Good night, Katherine," he replied, his voice warm in the darkness. She drifted to sleep with the sound of rain on the roof and Kit's steady breathing nearby, feeling safer than she had any right to given their precarious situation. When she woke, pale morning light was filtering through the windows. The storm had passed, leaving a washed, clean world outside. Kit was already up, tending to the horses. Katherine quickly dressed and joined him, helping to prepare for the day's journey. "The storm will have made the trails muddy," Kit warned as they ate a quick breakfast. "We'll have to take it slow." They set out as the sun broke fully over the mountains, illuminating a landscape transformed by rain. Wildflowers had appeared overnight, splashing the hillsides with vibrant colors. The air was fresh and clean, carrying the scent of wet pine and sage. Their progress was indeed slower, the horses picking their way carefully through muddy sections of trail. By midday, however, the ground was drying and they were able to make better time. Kit kept them away from the main trails, instead following ridgelines that offered views of the surrounding country. Twice, they spotted distant riders and took cover until they passed. Whether they were gang members or ordinary travelers, it wasn't worth the risk of discovery. As the day wore on, Katherine found herself increasingly aware of Kit, the confident way he sat his horse, the alertness with which he scanned their surroundings, the occasional smile he sent her way when she navigated a difficult section of trail. She tried to dismiss the feelings growing within her as simply gratitude for his protection, but in quiet moments, she knew it was more than that. They made camp that night in a hidden valley, nestled against a rocky outcropping that provided shelter from the wind. As they sat by their small fire, Katherine found herself wondering what would happen after they reached Carson City. Would she return to Pioche once the danger had passed? Would Kit go back to his quiet life on the ranch? "You're thinking hard," Kit observed, passing her a cup of coffee. Katherine smiled ruefully. "Just wondering what comes next, after Carson City, I mean." Kit was quiet for a moment, poking at the fire. "What do you want to happen?" The question caught her off guard with its directness. In Boston, conversations were layered with social niceties, meanings hidden behind careful words. Kit's straightforward approach was both refreshing and challenging. "I want to continue teaching," she said finally. "I believe in what I'm doing with those children, but... He prompted when she hesitated. "But I'm not sure if Pioche is safe anymore, even if the gangs are arrested. I've been marked now, associated with this conflict." Kit nodded, understanding in his eyes. "There are other towns that need good teachers. Silver City, Eureka, even Carson City itself." "Yes, but none of them are." She stopped, suddenly aware of what she'd nearly revealed. "Are what?" Kit asked, his eyes holding hers across the fire. "Are near your ranch," Katherine admitted quietly. The words hung between them, honest and unveiling. Kit set down his coffee cup, his expression unreadable in the flickering light. "Katherine," he began, his voice low. The crack of a rifle shot split the night air, sending both of them diving for cover. Kit moved with lightning speed, kicking dirt over their fire and pulling Katherine behind the rocks. "Someone's found us," he whispered, drawing his pistol. Katherine's heart hammered against her ribs. "Who? Can't tell yet. Stay down." Another shot rang out, closer this time. The bullet struck the rock near their heads, sending stone fragments flying. "We're pinned here," Kit muttered, peering carefully around the edge of their shelter. "Can't reach the horses without exposing ourselves. What do we do?" Katherine asked, fear making her voice shake despite her best efforts. Kit's expression was grim but determined. "When I give the signal, run for that stand of trees." He pointed to a dense thicket about 30 yards away. "I'll cover you. What about you? I'll be right behind you." The certainty in his voice didn't quite reach his eyes. "Ready." Before she could protest, Kit fired 3 rapid shots toward the source of the attack. "Now," he hissed, and Katherine ran, her skirts clutched in one hand as she sprinted for the trees. She heard more gunfire behind her, then Kit's footsteps following. She reached the trees and pressed herself against the trunk of a large pine, gasping for breath. Seconds later, Kit joined her, reloading his pistol with practiced movements. "Are you hit?" he asked urgently, scanning her for injuries. "No, I'm fine. Who's shooting at us?" "Can't tell for sure, but I saw red bandanas. Delgado's men." A voice called out from the darkness. "We know you're there, Jackson. Send out the teacher and we might let you live." Kit's jaw tightened. "They must have been tracking us since we left the ranch." "What do they want with me?" Katherine whispered. "I don't know anything about the marshal. Doesn't matter if you do or don't. You're valuable to them either way." Kit checked his ammunition. "We need to move deeper into the trees. Once we're covered, we can circle back for the horses." They began moving quietly through the underbrush, Kit leading the way with his pistol ready. Behind them, they could hear men searching their abandoned campsite, voices rising in frustration when they found nothing. The forest grew denser as they pushed forward, the darkness almost complete beneath the thick canopy. Katherine struggled to keep her footing on the uneven ground, grateful for Kit's hand reaching back to steady her when she stumbled. They had covered perhaps a quarter mile when they heard horses approaching from ahead, cutting off their escape route. "This way," Kit whispered, pulling her sideways into an even thicker section of forest. They pressed through tangled brush, branches scraping at their clothing and skin. Just as Katherine thought they might have escaped detection, a shout went up behind them. "There they are!" More gunfire erupted, bullets splintering tree trunks around them. Kit pulled Katherine down behind a fallen log, his body partially shielding hers. "How many?" she gasped. "At least 6 that I've seen," he replied grimly. "They've got us surrounded." The reality of their situation hit Katherine like a physical blow. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped. "This is my fault," she whispered. "If anything happens to you, nothing's going to happen," Kit interrupted firmly. "I'm getting you out of this." His eyes, barely visible in the darkness, held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Trust me." Before she could respond, he leaned closer, his voice dropping so low she barely heard him. "There's a creek about 50 yards east of here. If you follow it downstream, it leads to a road that will take you to Carson City." "What about you?" Kit didn't answer directly. Instead, he pressed something into her hand, a small Derringer pistol. "2 shots," he said. "Use them only if you have to." Realization dawned on her. "No," she said fiercely. "I'm not leaving you here, Katherine." The way he said her name, gentle but unyielding, silenced her protest. I'll draw them off, give you a chance to escape. They'll kill you. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. They'll have to catch me first. His hand moved to cup her cheek, the touch startlingly tender amid the danger surrounding them. You asked what comes next. I want there to be a next for you. For us, Katherine corrected, surprised by her own boldness. I want there to be a next for us. For a heartbeat, time seemed suspended. Then Kit leaned forward and kissed her, brief but fervent, a promise and a farewell wrapped into one. Go east until you hit the creek, he repeated. When I start shooting, run and don't look back. Before she could argue further, Kit moved away from their shelter, firing his pistol in a different direction to draw their pursuers' attention. Shouts erupted as the gang members redirected their efforts, charging after the new sounds. Tears blurring her vision, Katherine did as he instructed, slipping away toward the east while chaos erupted behind her. The sound of gunfire receded as she pushed through the underbrush, her heart torn between survival and the desperate need to go back for Kit. She found the creek where he'd said it would be, the water glinting silver in patches of moonlight that broke through the trees. Gunfire still sounded in the distance, but less frequently now. She hesitated, the derringer clutched in her hand, torn by indecision. The crack of a single shot, louder than the others, made her decision for her. Katherine turned and began making her way back toward the sounds of conflict, moving as quietly as she could through the forest. She might not be a frontiersman like Kit, but she wasn't going to abandon him. As she approached the area where they'd separated, the forest fell eerily silent. She crouched behind a tree, listening intently. Voices drifted to her on the night air, men speaking Spanish, sounding angry and frustrated. He got away, one said. Martinez is dead. The boss won't be happy, another replied. What about the woman? No sign of her. Must have run when the shooting started. We keep searching. They can't have gone far. Their horses are still back at the camp. Katherine remained perfectly still as the voices moved away. Once she was certain they were gone, she began carefully searching for any sign of Kit. The darkness made it nearly impossible to see details, but she persisted, moving in ever-widening circles from where she'd last seen him. A faint sound, barely a rustle, caught her attention. She froze, the derringer raised defensively. Katherine. The whisper was so soft she almost missed it. She turned toward the sound, squinting into the darkness. Kit. A shadow separated from the base of a large tree. Kit moved toward her, limping slightly but very much alive. Relief crashed over Katherine with such force that her knees nearly buckled. I told you to run, he said, but there was no anger in his voice, only weary concern. I did. Then I came back. She moved to his side, noticing how he favored his left leg. You're hurt. Just a graze, I'll be fine. He glanced around alertly. They're still searching the area, we need to move. Together, they made their way carefully through the forest, Kit leaning on her slightly for support. The gang members had spread out, forcing them to change direction several times to avoid detection. By the time they reached the creek, the first faint light of dawn was appearing in the eastern sky. We can't go back for the horses, Kit said, his voice tight with pain. Have to follow the creek, as I said. Katherine helped him into the shallow water where their footprints wouldn't show. The cold water seemed to revive him somewhat, and his limp became less pronounced as they made their way downstream. The creek led them out of the forest and into more open country as the sun rose fully. They kept to the water for as long as possible, but eventually the creek widened and deepened, becoming impassable on foot. The road should be just beyond that ridge, Kit said, pointing to a low hill ahead. They climbed slowly, Kit gritting his teeth against the pain in his leg. When they reached the top, they were rewarded with the sight of a rutted dirt road winding through the valley below. Carson City is maybe 15 miles that way, Kit indicated west, where the road disappeared around a distant mountain. If we're lucky, we might encounter a freight wagon or stage. They made their way down to the road and began walking westward. The sun rose higher, its heat becoming oppressive. Katherine tore a strip from her petticoat to rebind Kit's wound, a bloody furrow along his outer thigh where the bullet had grazed him. "It needs proper cleaning," she fretted, tying off the makeshift bandage. "It will keep until we reach town," Kit assured her, though the lines of pain around his mouth told a different story. They walked for hours, stopping only briefly to rest in whatever shade they could find. Kit grew paler as the day progressed, though he refused to stop for more than a few minutes at a time. "They'll realize we've escaped the forest eventually," he explained. "We need to reach Carson City before they can organize a wider search." It was late afternoon when they heard the blessed sound of wagon wheels behind them. They turned to see a freight wagon approaching, loaded with supplies and driven by an older man with a snow-white beard. Kit stepped into the road, waving his hat to signal the driver. The wagon slowed to a stop, the driver regarding them with suspicious eyes. "You folks look like you've had some trouble," he observed, taking in their disheveled appearance and Kit's blood-stained trousers. "We were attacked by bandits in the night," Kit explained, not entirely untruthfully. "Lost our horses. We're trying to reach Carson City." The driver studied them for a moment longer, then nodded. "Climb up. I'm headed there myself with supplies for the governor's mansion." Katherine could have wept with relief. She helped Kit onto the wagon bench, then climbed up beside him. The driver introduced himself as Ezekiel Barnes, a freight hauler who made regular runs between Virginia City and Carson City. "Been seeing more trouble on the roads lately," Barnes commented as the wagon rumbled westward. "Those gang wars in Pioche are spreading out. Territorial marshals have their hands full." Kit and Katherine exchanged glances but said nothing about their connection to the situation. Instead, they gratefully accepted the water and jerky Barnes shared with them, regaining some strength as they traveled. The sun was setting when they finally saw Carson City in the distance, a collection of buildings nestled at the base of the Sierra Nevada mountains. Lights were beginning to twinkle in windows as darkness fell, a welcome sight after their ordeal. "I'll take you straight to the doctor," Barnes offered, eyeing Kit's bandaged leg. "He's a good man, Doc Miller. Fixed me up proper when I took a tumble last winter." True to his word, Barnes delivered them to a neat clapboard building with Dr. Samuel Miller, physician and surgeon, painted on the door. The doctor, a middle-aged man with spectacles and a kind face, took one look at Kit and ushered him inside. "Bullet wound?" he asked clinically as he helped Kit onto an examination table. "Just a graze," Kit replied. "But it could use proper cleaning." Dr. Miller nodded, already preparing his instruments. "Madam, you can wait in the front room if you'd prefer. This might not be pleasant to watch." Katherine shook her head firmly. "I'm staying." The doctor didn't argue, simply handed her a basin of water and clean cloths. "You can help then." Together they cleaned and properly bandaged Kit's wound. The bullet had indeed only grazed him, but the injury was deep enough to require several stitches. Kit endured the procedure stoically, his only reaction an occasional tightening of his jaw. When they were finished, Dr. Miller insisted Kit rest before attempting to see the governor. "You've lost blood and you're exhausted," he said firmly. "The governor will still be there in the morning." "We don't have rooms arranged," Katherine began, but the doctor waved away her concern. "My wife and I have a spare bedroom upstairs. You're welcome to it for the night." Katherine started to protest that they would need 2 rooms, but Kit caught her eye and gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. She understood immediately it was safer to stay together. "That's very kind of you, Doctor," she said instead. "We're most grateful." They were given a simple but comfortable room with a double bed, a washstand, and a small sitting area. Mrs. Miller, a cheerful woman with silver-streaked brown hair, brought them a hot meal and fresh clothing borrowed from her children who were grown and moved away. "You poor dears," she clucked sympathetically. "Bandits on the road. The territory isn't what it used to be." After she left, Katherine helped Kit change into the clean clothes, both of them carefully maintaining a proper distance despite the intimate circumstances. They ate ravenously, the hot food restoring their energy and spirits. "We should reach the governor first thing tomorrow," Kit said as they finished their meal. "The sooner we explain the situation, the sooner he can send help to Pioche." Katherine nodded, setting aside her empty plate. "Do you think we'll be believed? It's a rather extraordinary story. The governor knows about the gang situation. Your status as the schoolteacher will lend credibility." Kit smiled slightly. "Besides, we have the bullet hole in my leg as evidence." Despite the gravity of their situation, Katherine found herself smiling in return. The events of the past few days had forged a connection between them that transcended ordinary acquaintance. They had seen each other at their most vulnerable and their most courageous. Whatever came next, they would face it together. "You should take the bed," Kit said, nodding toward the comfortable-looking mattress. "I can sleep in the chair." Katherine shook her head. "Absolutely not. You're injured and need proper rest." She hesitated, then added firmly, "The bed is large enough for both of us." Kit's eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't argue. They prepared for sleep with careful courtesy, each respecting the other's privacy as much as the small room allowed. When they finally settled into bed, they lay on opposite sides, a respectable distance between them. "Good night, Katherine," Kit said softly. "Good night," she replied, acutely aware of his presence just inches away. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. Her mind kept returning to the moment in the forest when Kit had kissed her brief, but filled with unspoken promises. Had it been merely the product of a desperate situation, or something more enduring beside her? Kit's breathing had deepened, suggesting he had fallen asleep. Katherine turned carefully to look at him. In repose, his face appeared younger, the lines of worry and vigilance smoothed away. She resisted the urge to reach out and touch him, to reassure herself that he was really there, safe beside her. Eventually, lulled by his steady presence, she drifted into sleep. Morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the curtains. Katherine woke to find herself curled against Kit's side, her head resting on his shoulder. She froze, mortified at having unconsciously sought his warmth during the night. Before she could move away, Kit's arm tightened slightly around her. "Good morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. Katherine lifted her head to look at him, prepared to apologize. The words died on her lips when she saw his expression warm, tender, without a trace of discomfort or censure. "I'm sorry," she said anyway. "I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize," he interrupted gently. "I'm not." The simple statement hung between them, weighted with meaning. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, the barriers of propriety and circumstance temporarily suspended. A knock at the door broke the spell. "Breakfast is ready," Mrs. Miller called cheerfully. "The doctor says Mr. Jackson should be fit to travel to the governor's office afterward." They dressed quickly and joined the Millers downstairs. Over breakfast, they refined their plan. They would go directly to the territorial governor's mansion and request an immediate audience, explaining the urgent nature of their information. Dr. Miller offered to accompany them. "I know Governor Bradley slightly," he explained. "My introduction might help secure a meeting more quickly." They accepted gratefully. After breakfast, they borrowed a carriage from the doctor and made their way to the governor's mansion, an impressive structure on the western edge of town. The mansion's secretary was reluctant to grant them an audience at first, but Dr. Miller's reputation and the mention of the Pioche gang war eventually secured them a meeting. They were shown into a handsomely appointed study where Governor Lewis Bradley, a distinguished man in his 60s with a neatly trimmed beard, awaited them. "Dr. Miller tells me you have information about the situation in Pioche," the governor said after introductions were made. "I'm most interested to hear it. We've had troubling reports." Katherine took a deep breath and began their story, explaining how she had been caught between the gangs, how Kit had helped her escape, and the misunderstanding about the telegram that had made her a target. As she spoke, the governor's expression grew increasingly grave. "This coincides with reports from our marshals," he said when she finished. "We have indeed sent an undercover agent to gather evidence against both Blackburn and Delgado. The fact that they know this is deeply concerning." "The town is under siege, sir," Kit added. "Ordinary citizens can't go about their business without fear of being caught in the crossfire." Governor Bradley nodded, rising from his desk to pace the room. "I received a telegraph from Carson City's marshal just this morning. He's assembling a force to ride to Pioche, but they won't be ready to depart until tomorrow." He stopped, looking directly at Katherine. "Miss Collins, you've shown remarkable courage. Your testimony will be valuable when these men are brought to justice." "Then you believe we can return to Pioche soon?" she asked hopefully. The governor's expression sobered. "I believe it would be safest for you to remain in Carson City until the situation is resolved. Both gangs are looking for you, and your presence could complicate the marshal's work." Katherine's heart sank. She thought of her students, her small classroom, the life she'd begun building in Pioche. For how long? It's difficult to say. Weeks, perhaps. The governor's tone was sympathetic but firm. "In the meantime, we can arrange accommodations for you here in the capital. I understand you're a teacher. Perhaps our local school would welcome your assistance temporarily." Kit, who had been silent, spoke up. "With respect, Governor, Miss Collins would be safer at my ranch outside Pioche. It's remote, defensible, and my ranch hands are capable men." The governor considered this. "You've already been attacked once on your property, Mr. Jackson." "Which means we'll be doubly vigilant," Kit replied. "I can't speak for Miss Collins, but I intend to return to my home once her safety is assured." Katherine straightened her spine. "I agree with Mr. Jackson. I came west to build a life, not to hide from those who would threaten it." A slight smile touched the governor's lips. "You both show the spirit that built this territory." He turned to his desk and wrote briefly on a sheet of paper. "I cannot order you to remain in Carson City, but I strongly advise caution. This document authorizes you to travel with the marshal's party when they depart tomorrow. It will at least ensure you have protection on the journey." They left the governor's mansion with mixed emotions, relieved that action was being taken, but aware that their ordeal wasn't yet over. They spent the remainder of the day in Carson City, purchasing supplies and replacement clothing, and arranging to travel with the marshals the following day. That evening they dined with the Millers, who insisted they stay another night. As they sat on the porch after dinner, watching the sunset paint the Sierra Nevada in shades of gold and purple, Kit turned to Katherine. "Are you certain about returning to Pioche?" he asked quietly. "The governor was right. You'd be safer here until the gangs are dealt with." Katherine considered the question seriously. The past few days had shown her dangers she'd never imagined when she'd decided to come west. Yet they had also revealed strengths within herself she hadn't known existed. "I'm certain," she said finally. "My place is there with my students, with the community." She hesitated, then added more softly, "with you if that's what you want." Kit's eyes held hers, the depth of emotion in them taking her breath away. "I want that more than anything," he said simply. but I need you to be sure. Life on my ranch isn't easy in the best of times. During this trouble, it could be dangerous." "I didn't come west looking for an easy life," Katherine replied. "I came looking for a meaningful one." She reached for his hand, a boldness she would never have attempted a week ago. "These past days have been frightening, but they've also been the most alive I've ever felt, being with you. I don't want that to end." Kit's fingers tightened around hers. "It won't," he promised. "Whatever happens in Pioche, we'll face it together." The marshal's party departed at dawn the next day, 12 stern-faced men led by Marshal James Cooper, a veteran lawman with a reputation for being both fair and formidable. Kit and Katherine rode in the middle of the group, well protected from potential ambush. The journey back to Pioche took 3 days, the party moving cautiously through territory where gang members might be watching the roads. They encountered no trouble, however, suggesting that both the Blackburn and Delgado gangs had withdrawn to their strongholds in preparation for the coming conflict. As they approached Pioche, Katherine was dismayed to see smoke still rising from several buildings. The town looked battered, with broken windows and bullet-scarred walls testifying to the violence that had occurred in their absence. Marshal Cooper directed his men to secure the main street before allowing Katherine and Kit to enter the town. They rode in slowly, shocked by the eerie quiet that had replaced the usual bustle of the mining community. Sheriff Mills met them outside his office, his left arm in a sling but his determination undiminished. "About time the territorial government sent help," he said by way of greeting. "The situation's at a stalemate for now. Blackburn's hold up at the Silver Dollar, Delgado at the Mexican Rose, neither side's willing to back down." "What about the townspeople?" Katherine asked anxiously. "Most have evacuated to outlying farms or the church," the sheriff replied. "Your students are safe, Miss Collins. Padre Gonzalez has been conducting impromptu school lessons in the church basement." Relief washed over her. "Thank God." Marshal Cooper conferred briefly with Sheriff Mills, then addressed his men. "We'll set up headquarters here. I want 4 men watching each gang's location at all times. The rest of you patrol the streets in pairs. No one moves against either gang until I give the order." To Kit and Katherine, he added, "I recommend you leave town until this is resolved. We expect resistance when we move to make arrests." Kit nodded. "We're headed to my ranch as soon as Miss Collins can check on her students." They made their way to the church on the hill, where Padre Gonzalez greeted them with relief and joy. Katherine was immediately surrounded by her students, their eager voices overlapping as they shared their experiences and asked where she had been. "I had an unexpected journey," she explained, kneeling to embrace the youngest children. "But I'm back now, and soon everything will return to normal." "Are you really going to live at Mr. Jackson's ranch?" asked Emma White, a precocious 10-year-old with observant eyes. Katherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. "For a while, yes, until it's safe to return to town." "My pa says Mr. Jackson's the best rancher in the county," piped up Thomas Henderson, whose father owned the general store. "He pays fair and his cattle are always healthy." Kit, who had been speaking with Padre Gonzalez, turned at the mention of his name. His eyes met Katherine's over the children's heads, warm with unspoken emotion. They left the church with promises to return once the town was secure. Katherine stopped briefly at the millinery shop where she had rented a room, finding it closed but undamaged. A note on the door from Mrs. Peterson, the owner, indicated she had gone to stay with her sister in Silver City until the troubles passed. Kit helped Katherine gather her few possessions: books, clothing, teaching materials, and a small photograph of her parents that she cherished. They packed everything onto a borrowed wagon and set out for the ranch, as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. "Home," Kit said simply, as they crested the hill overlooking his property. Katherine followed his gaze, seeing the ranch with new eyes not as a temporary shelter, but as the beginning of a new chapter in her life. The small log house, the barn, the corrals, the garden Rosa tended so carefully, all of it represented something she had never truly had in Boston: belonging. Rosa and Miguel emerged from the house as the wagon approached, their faces lighting with relief and welcome. Patch bounded across the yard, barking joyfully at their return. "Gracias a Dios," Rosa exclaimed, helping Katherine down from the wagon. "We have been so worried." Miguel returned from town with such terrible news. "We're safe," Kit assured them, embracing Miguel with the warmth of true friendship. "And the territorial marshals have arrived to end the gang war." That evening, as they shared a celebratory meal, Katherine found herself watching Kit the way he laughed at Miguel's jokes, the gentleness with which he treated Rosa, the quiet confidence he exuded in his own home. She tried to imagine returning to her solitary room above the millinery once the trouble in Pioche was resolved, and found she couldn't picture it anymore. As if sensing her thoughts, Kit's eyes found hers across the table. The connection between them was almost palpable, a bridge built of shared danger, mutual respect, and growing affection. Later, as Rosa and Miguel retired to their cabin and Kit walked Katherine to her bedroom door, they paused in the quiet hallway. "What happens now?" Katherine asked softly. Kit took her hands in his expression serious. "That depends on you. I know what I want, but I won't presume." Katherine's heart quickened. "Tell me what you want." "I want you to stay," he said simply. "Not just until Pioche is safe, but after. I want to build a life with you, Katherine, teaching, ranching, creating something that matters." She stepped closer, lifting one hand to touch his face. "I want that too." Their kiss was different from the desperate one they'd shared in the forest, tender, unhurried, filled with promise. When they finally parted, Kit rested his forehead against hers. "I should let you rest," he murmured, though he made no move to step away. Katherine smiled. "Yes, you should. We have tomorrow and all the days after." It took the marshals 3 weeks to completely dismantle the Blackburn and Delgado gangs. The leaders were arrested and sent to the territorial prison, their followers scattered or captured. Pioche began the slow process of rebuilding, businesses reopening and families returning to their homes. Katherine divided her time between the ranch and the town, resuming her teaching duties while helping Rosa with the household. The schoolhouse had survived the gang war intact, and she found her classroom filled with eager students who had missed their lessons during the disruption. On weekends, Kit taught her to ride properly, to shoot accurately, and to appreciate the wild beauty of the Nevada landscape. In the evenings, she read to him from her favorite books, introduced him to poetry, and shared stories of her childhood in Boston. Their courtship was unconventional by Eastern standards: no formal calls, no chaperoned outings, no delicate dance of societal rules. Instead, they built their relationship on shared work, honest conversation, and the deep understanding that had grown between them during their journey to Carson City. 1 month after their return, Kit asked Katherine to marry him. They stood on the porch as the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. "I don't have much to offer beyond this land and my promise to love you for all my days," he said, holding out a simple gold band. "But everything I have is yours if you'll have me." Katherine's answer was unhesitating. "Yes." They were married in the small white church on the hill outside Pioche, with Rosa and Miguel standing as witnesses, and Katherine's students singing hymns. Padre Gonzalez conducted the ceremony, his weathered face beaming as he pronounced them husband and wife. The reception was held at the ranch, where townspeople and neighboring ranchers gathered to celebrate. Sheriff Mills, fully recovered from his wound, proposed a toast to the couple whose courage helped bring peace back to Pioche. As the celebration continued around them, Kit led Katherine away from the crowd to a quiet spot beneath an old juniper tree. In the distance, the mountains were turning purple with the approaching dusk, and the first stars were appearing in the eastern sky. "Are you happy?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. Katherine leaned into his embrace, content in a way she had never imagined possible when she'd first stepped off the stagecoach in Pioche. "Completely," she replied, turning to face him. "Are you?" Kit's smile was answer enough, but he spoke anyway. "I found the woman who breathes spirit into everything she touches, the woman who chose danger by my side over safety without me, the woman who sees beauty in this hard land and possibility in a simple rancher." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. "How could I be anything but happy?" Their life together was not without challenges. The ranching life demanded constant work, and the Nevada climate was unforgiving in both summer heat and winter cold. But they faced each difficulty together, their bond strengthening with each obstacle overcome. 3 years after their marriage, Katherine gave birth to their first child, a son they named James, after Kit's father. 2 years later, a daughter followed, whom they called Elizabeth after Katherine's mother. The ranch prospered under their joint care, expanding to include more cattle, better buildings, and eventually a small schoolhouse where Katherine taught their children, and those of neighboring ranchers. Pioche itself changed with the times. The silver mines eventually played out, but the town survived as a center for cattle ranching and commerce. Katherine's original school grew into a proper academy with multiple teachers and classrooms. On quiet evenings after the children were asleep, Kit and Katherine often sat on their porch watching the stars emerge over the valley. Sometimes they spoke of the future, sometimes of the past, and sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, grateful for the life they had built together. "Do you ever regret it?" Kit asked once, "leaving Boston for all of this?" Katherine considered the question. Looking out over their land, the ranch house expanded and improved over the years, the barn full of healthy livestock, the garden abundant with vegetables and flowers, the distant fields where their cattle grazed. "Never," she said with absolute certainty. "This is where I was meant to be, with you." And as Kit's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with the familiar comfort of long partnership, Katherine knew it was true. From that chaotic day in Pioche when bullets had flown and danger had threatened, they had forged a life of purpose, love, and deep contentment, a life she wouldn't trade for all the comforts and security of her eastern past. In saving her from the crossfire of rival gangs, Kit Jackson had given Katherine Collins far more than safety. He had given her a home, a purpose, and a love that grew stronger with each passing season, a love as enduring as the Nevada mountains and as boundless as the western sky.